I did that, yeah. So welcome everyone. Happy New Year. Um, it's a wonderful way to begin the year, I believe, because in the Tibetan cultural tradition, when the Tibetan Lunar New Year begins, and that will happen in February, the first things to do in the new cycle would be associated with virtue. So people would traditionally first go and visit their teachers, then pay homage to local kings and chieftains and so forth. And in doing all of that, they would try to create some auspicious interdependence, some positive causes for the new cycle. And quite often, after that happens, there would be a big prayer festival, a Mönlam, in which people recite thousands or hundreds of thousands, actually, of prayers for auspiciousness in the new cycle. So planting very, very positive seeds in the mind so that for the entirety of the ensuing year, everyone's mind is attuned to virtue as much as possible. And virtue here means things like love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth. So I think doing some yoga on the 1st of January and doing some meditation practice is a wonderful way to begin it all. And many of you probably were here for the asana practice just an hour ago. So that's, of course, a wonderful way of working on our mastery over the energies of our body and our breath, and to a certain degree of our mind. And this session, which is going to be 2 hours, is focused on tantric practice. So we're going to talk about Buddhist Tantra, and that although it does have a very strong connection to the energies of our body and speech, or our body and breath, that is primarily focused on our mind. So kind of shifting the focus slightly from body and breath to body, breath, and especially the mind. But even though it's a tantric practice that we're going to be talking about, that's not tantra in the popular sense of that word. So there's not going to be any, activating erotic energy or following your bliss, and no one's going to get naked, yes, unless they choose to, and things like that. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Buddhist and by extension also Hindu and Jain definition of the word tantra and what it refers to, and what does Vaitara have to do with it all. And we will be doing some meditation and some yoga nidra. And so for our first meditation, we're actually going to do it right now. We're going to focus on establishing a positive motivation and focusing our mind on positive mental states that are absolutely necessary to perform Vaitara practice successfully. Then we'll chat about Vaitara practice. We'll clarify some points. You'll be able to ask some questions if you have any. We'll talk about Vaitara's form and mantra and things like that, and where does this practice come from, what is its significance, and so on. And then we'll do some meditation on Vaitara, once again, to basically apply everything that we have just heard. Then a little bit more chatting, and then we'll conclude with a nice, relaxed yoga nidra practice. So by then you'll be extremely tired of me and my chatting, so you'll be just able to lie down, relax fully, and either follow the instructions or just tune it all out and blissfully fall asleep. And as long as you're not snoring, that's totally fine with me. If you are snoring, someone will gently touch your wrist or your shoulder and basically wake you back up. So that's kind of the overall plan, alternating meditation and discussion. And for right now, everyone is already in a seemingly stable and comfortable position. So we'll do a preliminary meditation, because in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and in the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism in general, everything that we begin is supposed to begin with a truly vast and profound positive motivation. If we're not establishing that motivation when we begin a certain activity, then we're basically losing an opportunity to once again work on the domain of our desires, wishes, aspirations, intentions, what is in psychology known as cognitive intelligence or cognitive balance. So not to lose that opportunity and to turn everything that we do into a meaningful activity that contributes to greater well-being and happiness, we do these types of preliminary meditations that are just focused on establishing a truly vast aspiration for something. And if anyone has ever done yoga nidra practices that are more closely aligned with the Hindu tradition, you would know that in those, quite often there is an element of establishing one sankalpa, or a truly positive intention for why you're doing this practice. So it's very similar in that regard. So we are we will be revisiting some of the same points that are coming up on Vaitara practice and in many Yoga Nidra practices as well. So let's just find a comfortable stationary position. If you're not in one already, it's totally fine to just make sure your spine is relatively straight and your body is still and stable, but no need necessarily to adopt lotus posture or anything like that. As long as you're feeling comfortable right now, and as long as you're able to bring some awareness to the body to observe the breath, it's totally fine. So that's what we begin with. If we want, we can spend some moments exploring the body and adjusting the different parts of the body to make sure we're truly comfortable, truly still and stable right now. If possible, very gently elongating the spine, dropping and relaxing the shoulders, making sure our hands are resting comfortably either on our lap or on our knees or thighs. Slightly tucking in our chin. If we want to, closing our eyes or keeping them partially hooded or just fully open but unfocused. And then with all of that preparation, bringing our attention, bringing our awareness into the body, into the domain of tactile sensations, and in particular, into the parts of the body that are currently in contact with the ground. Noticing the sensations of firmness and stability associated with the earth that's holding us. Relaxing the associated body parts, including our feet and toes, our legs in general, our pelvic floor. Exploring the sensations in our torso, relaxing the abdominal muscles, noticing the sensations in our lower back, and then the shoulders, upper arms, elbows, forearms, and then hands and fingers. Finally, softening the muscles of the face. And then bringing some awareness to the sensations associated with the process of breathing arising throughout the body. Sometimes it's nice to think of those as tactile waves that rush through the body when we breathe in and when we breathe out. And so keeping our mindful awareness on these sensations, and through that establishing greater degrees of attentional balance, releasing distraction with the exhalation, strengthening the clarity with the inhalation. And then with our body still breathing naturally and still resting in this manner, having brought some sense of stillness and stability into our body, some sense of naturalness into the process of breathing, we turn to our mind and we revisit our own aspirations and wishes, our own intentions for being here right now. First, exploring the original intentions that brought us here. Our intentions for practicing these inner methods in general. But then making those intentions, aspirations, wishes more profound and vast. Profound in that we start aspiring for the deepest possible type of well being, in addition to the more superficial types of happiness. Vast in that we wish for that well being to become manifest not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings, ideally. And in the Buddhist tradition, these aspects of vastness and profundity are unified in the motivation known as bodhicitta, or the mind of awakening, which is our wish to fully wake up, to become fully awakened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So if we can generate this resolve, this wish of, may I fully wake up for the benefit of all sentient beings, through exploring these practices, through applying these methods, through everything that I do, really. That's the best possible reason for being here, for doing this exploration, for doing Waitara practice. So breathing life into that for a few moments to make sure that the rest of this class is oriented towards that goal of fully waking up. And then releasing these thoughts and aspirations, coming back to the body to notice the sensations once again. Then introducing some movement to the body by moving our fingers, rocking back and forth gently, blinking the eyes open, stretching if we want to, and slowly concluding this preliminary meditation. So, in general, this element of motivation or establishing very profound intentions, and not simply intentions of, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to go deeper in my yoga practice, or why don't I explore greater degrees of mental stability and maybe do some therapy for that, or yeah, I would like to explore this theme of attentional stability, so I'll practice some concentration. Not just those, even though these are all very valuable psychological goals, but the deepest possible one of, may I fully uncover my greatest possible potential, my greatest potential for bringing happiness and well-being to all who live, but also experiencing the greatest possible happiness and well-being for myself as well. This very profound and deep motivation of wanting to fully wake up and to become awakened in the midst of beings who are currently dream walking or sleepwalking, that is seen as the only truly appropriate motivation for everything that we're about to do, talking about such practices as Vaitara and so on. And there's usually thousands upon thousands of hours that are invested into cultivating such motivation. So that is in itself a very elaborate system of training, cognitive training, as it would be called in psychology. And just 2-3 months ago, we did a whole course on that, on the so-called teaching of mind transformation or thought transformation or attitude bending, as I like to call it facetiously. And that was the primary thing we were talking about there. How do we bend our attitudes and our feelings and our aspirations and our intentions into this unique shape of wanting to become awakened for the benefit of all sentient beings? So that is kind of a preliminary training. Right now, we don't have thousands of hours to invest into that, so we just did it kind of as a fake it till you make it type of practice. So we then pretend, oh, we do all have bodhicitta, we do all have this wish to fully wake up. Let's now do something with it. And that's where we start exploring the practice of Vaitara, which belongs to, in Buddhism, a higher category of teachings known as Tantra. So of course, this word Tantra has a lot of different associations connected to it in the modern world. It somehow so happened that many people started associating Tantra with all sorts of follow your bliss kind of things and exploring sensuality and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with exploring sensuality or following your bliss at all. But the more traditional meaning of the word Tantra was a bit different from that, let's put it that way. So the word Tantra itself, of course, like many Sanskrit words, has different connotations. And in the Hindu tradition, the more common connotation that is often brought up when that word is translated is the connotation of a weave. So something woven together, weaving different things together. Whereas Buddhists, and in particular Tibetan Buddhists, when translating that word from Sanskrit into Tibetan, focused on a slightly different meaning. And the meaning that they chose and translated in Tibetan using the word gyu there is continuity. So Tantra can actually be translated as a mechanism. It can be translated as a weave. It can be translated as continuity, and there are many other translations possible as well. But these three are the most common ones. And when it comes to this idea of weave, and that's what's emphasized in the Hindu tradition quite often, or broadly speaking in the Hindu tradition, because the Hindu tradition, of course, is many different traditions under the same umbrella, but they're quite different from each other in many cases. But what's emphasized, and broadly speaking, in the Hindu tradition is the idea that when doing Tantra, when doing Tantric practice, we take different facets of our mind, we take different facets of our energy, and we quite literally weave something out of them. And as Robert Svoboda sometimes describes it, and many people would be familiar with his work, is one of the most prominent experts in Ayurveda, but beyond that in Agora, which is one of the most extreme forms of Hindu Tantra. How he sometimes describes it as the process of weaving the form of a deity, the form of a sort of figure that we're focusing on in order to manifest our greatest potential in the invisible realm. So people who practice Shiva tantras associated with Shiva, would take different levels and aspects of their own energy, different facets of their own mind, and they would weave the form of Shiva in the invisible realm, focusing on it so that this form that they have just woven helps them uncover their greatest possible potential. Similarly, those who practice tantras associated with the goddess, and of course the goddess in the Hindu tradition has thousands of forms, would focus on their chosen aspect of the goddess, let's say Lakshmi or Saraswati, and they would focus on Saraswati. They would weave the form of Saraswati in the invisible realm, focus on it, and practice with it until that form helps them uncover their greatest possible potential. So that's also all done in Buddhist Tantra as well. But because Tibetan Buddhists chose this idea of continuity or continuum to translate the word Tantra, the explanation that's given is usually just slightly different. It's described in the following manner. From a Buddhist point of view, and from the point of view of Mahayana Buddhism in particular, we already all possess enlightened nature, or at least enlightened potential. That's what's known as Buddha nature in Buddhism. So it's said that all sentient beings, dogs and humans and monkeys and other kinds of creatures, we all possess this incredible, amazing potential deep within us. That's actually one of the three major levels of our consciousness. The deepest level of our consciousness is equated with this great potential that we have. And that exists as an unbroken continuity. So under this gross level of the mind that we're experiencing right now, where we think, oh, I'm John and I live in London. Underneath that, there is a deeper level that's known as the substrate consciousness or subtle consciousness. And that's the level that we experience when our gross mind temporarily dissolves as we're falling asleep, for example. So that is a much more basic, foundational, primordial level. But underneath even that, there's this innermost subtle mind, as it's called, or pristine awareness. And that one already possesses all the knowledge, all the beauty, all the beautiful qualities, or at least from the point of view of some systems, it can very easily turn into that, much more easily than our gross consciousness or our subtle consciousness. So that innermost level is continuity, Tantra, that is unbroken, but it is not yet manifest, right? It's hidden. Otherwise, we would already be manifesting as Buddhas. We would not simply walk through walls and things like that, but we would simultaneously manifest in trillions of bodies to benefit all sentient beings. We would be infinitely blissful. We would be fully free from all the disturbing mental states, never getting angry, never getting confused, never experiencing neurotic craving and things like that. And we would just be blissing out all the time and at the same time effortlessly helping all sentient beings. So since that's not what's happening, at least for me, it means that the continuity of my Buddha nature is not yet manifest or uncovered. It's hidden by all sorts of garbage. So the process of removing that is the continuity also of tantric practice. So I have the ground continuity of my Buddha nature, and I also have the continuity of my practice, everything that I do to uncover that. And eventually I will have the continuity of actually manifesting as a Buddha. So when the path brings me to the uncovering of the ground, I will experience the result, and that will be my state of being a fully enlightened Buddha. So that's how it's described in the Buddhist tradition. There are these three tantras of the ground. That's our foundational nature. The path, that's everything that we do on a daily level. So if you do some mantras every day, if you do some meditation every day, if you do some attitude bending every day, that's your path tantra. And then eventually there will be the resultant tantra of actually gaining the result, becoming an infinitely blissful awakened being. So on the way to that, though, Buddhists, just like Hindus, do that process of weaving things together. They weave together different energies to manifest the form of a meditational deity, such as Vaitara. They weave together different mental states, such as loving kindness and compassion and wisdom and generosity and concentration and mindfulness and so forth, so that the mind becomes the mind of a Buddha. And through that, they arrive at the resultant state, which is exemplified, that's the term that's sometimes used, by the specific meditational deity that we focus on. So, of course, Hindus focus on meditational deities that belong to the Hindu pantheon, and their Tantra is associated primarily with a goddess in her different forms, with Shiva, and then by extension then with Ganapati and so forth, many other deities as well. But the primary tantras, of course, revolve around Shiva and Shakti quite often, just in terms of the sheer number of practices and methods. But beyond that, there are many tantras associated with all sorts of deities as well. In the Buddhist context, the understanding of a meditational deity is different because Buddhism is a non-theistic or trans-theistic tradition. So Buddhists do not see Tara as an external goddess that's sitting there, on Mount Kailash, for example, and just waiting for you to send some prayers her way. And then she comes and knocks you on the head, and that's how you become enlightened. No, she is a symbolic expression of our innermost nature. And sometimes other holy and realized beings can manifest as Vaitara for our sake, but it's not like she is a constantly present, externally existent, actual lady goddess who is like Thor in the Marvel universe, just traveling around the universe, and sometimes she receives our call, beams down here, does something for us, and then beams out. So not that. Instead, she is a symbolic expression of our innermost nature that can manifest for our benefit out of our innermost nature. And that's the thing that we're working with, generally speaking. So that's the idea behind tantric practice. So in Buddhism, of course, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, even though some remnants of that are also present in Chinese Buddhism, quite strongly in Japanese Buddhism, because Japan is one of the basically two countries that still have tantric Buddhism. It's Tibet and Japan. Some remnants also in Korean Buddhism, some elements of it in Vietnam, and some streaks, some kind of strands of that are also present, surprisingly, in Theravada countries. There are some people doing research on that, even though people sometimes think, oh no, these southern Buddhist countries, they're very different from this whole tantric thingy that's happening in Tibet and Japan. They're quite strict about their practice. You do vipassana and things like that. You meditate on your breath. You focus on the simplicity aspect of things. In actuality, research shows that there's quite a lot of different proto-tantric elements that are in use in Theravada Buddhism as well. So just different elements of that are present throughout the Buddhist world, but the particular emphasis on these practices for our covering our innermost continuity of awakening, that emphasis is especially made in the, largely speaking, Tibetan Buddhist region, the whole area to which Tibetan Buddhism has historically spread. And that is not just Tibet itself, not Tibet proper alone. It is also the northern regions of India, the Himalayan region, countries like Bhutan. There's a lot of Tantric Buddhism in Nepal, and Nepal actually has its own unique lineage of Tantric Buddhism, Newari Buddhism, which is kind of independent from Tibetan Buddhism. Now they're kind of coming closer together. But that's a tradition that has been historically practiced and transmitted on its own. Then you have it in the Himalayan regions of India, such as Ladakh, Zanskar, and all of those. In Mongolia, very, very prominently, Vaitara practice is extremely popular in Mongolia. The Buddhist regions of Russia, Kalmykia, Buryatia, and Tuva, where historically 3 branches of Mongolians were practicing these methods. And then in this day and age, all over the world, because you can find a Tibetan Buddhist center pretty much anywhere in this world, certainly in the larger cities, but because people these days receive these teachings online, practice them without needing to really travel anywhere, you have people who practice Buddhist Tantra all over the place. So what they're trying to do there is, first, before these methods are applied, really, assemble all the preliminary components, all the foundational building blocks that are then to be woven together into, for example, Vaitara practice itself. So that would mean that initially when we approach these techniques, we would start by training in such practices as loving kindness meditation. That's one of the foundational building blocks. That's fairly popular, the mindfulness movement in the secular world, so nothing particularly exotic about that. But doing quite a lot of that is a preliminary practice for then applying such methods as Vaitara. Compassion practice, another type of meditation. Concentration practice, and even just focusing on the breath like we just did would be a powerful precursor to Tara practice as well. Then they would study different facets of Buddhist philosophy, how does the Buddha really perceive this universe? How does he describe its existence? What does he think about the nature of the self? Does the self exist? Is the self permanent? Is the self self-existent? Is the self that Atman that is described in some philosophical systems of India? Or is there non-self instead? Are phenomena truly existent, or are they empty? So exploring all of that, practicing with that, meditating on that in different ways, doing for some people koan practice and things like that, analytical emptiness meditations, all of those sorts of things eventually bring us to a certain understanding of reality. And then practicing different methods for strengthening the positivity in our mind, lessening the negativity. So that's why you would see Buddhists, if you, for example, were right now to travel to Bodh Gaya in India, which is the place where the Buddha became enlightened, and right now there are big festivals happening there. The Dalai Lama just concluded a 3-day sequence of teachings there. You would walk around the so-called Bodhi Stupa, which marks the place where the Buddha got enlightened, and you would see thousands, actually tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, pilgrims doing prayers there right now and doing prostrations, which is when you do a full-length bow on the ground, reciting mantras, making offerings and things like that. And you would be like, well, what does this all have to do with meditation or even with Tantra, this process of weaving things or uncovering our innermost potential, right? This all seems like ritual. And I'm not really into ritual, people say, I'm more into kind of going straight to the essence. Well, for people who are doing those sorts of things, it's not ritual as an empty ceremony in which you just go through some movements and then you feel good about yourself, or you do something and then your priest approves of your practice and says, yes, well done. It's not that. There is very particular psychological significance to all of these, or psychological meaning to all those sorts of things. So when you see someone pouring multiple bowls of water, pouring water into multiple bowls, then reciting some mantras, then emptying those bowls, then doing that again, and then repeating that literally hundreds of thousands of times, that is a specific psychological method for strengthening some positive aspects of the mind. And that is often done as a preliminary for such practices as Vaitara. If you're seeing someone lighting thousands of lamps, which is also frequently done on the occasion of New Year celebrations, once again, that is done to strengthen certain aspects of our mind and by extension also of our body and speech. Same with prostrations, same with reciting mantras, same with just walking around that stupa, which is what a lot of people do, and so forth. And it's all done to train our mind to deepen those positive qualities so that all of that gives access to these profound methods for uncovering the continuity that is associated with our deepest nature. Once that's done, we don't need any of these methods necessarily associated with mantras and so forth. But until that work has been completed, we're relying upon them. And that's why you see people playing with their rosaries, and making water bowl offerings and prostrating and doing all these other types of things that for us might appear as being merely ritualistic in nature. Oh, these are just rituals. I'm not really into that. I'm more into meditation. These are all forms of meditation that are brought together, woven together, so that our deepest nature can be uncovered. And another thing to know about Tantra in Buddhism, but by extension, that's also true for Hinduism. And I don't know that much about Jain Tantra, but I would imagine there is some similarity there as well. But for Buddhist and Hindu Tantra, that's extremely true. When Tantra is mentioned, when these tantric techniques are mentioned, they always have to do with the meditational deity that one practices with. Because once again, for the Hindu tradition, you're not simply weaving, something that is random. You're weaving a specific form that has been historically given to you by ideally your teacher, well, necessarily your teacher, and that would be the form of Shiva for Shiva Tantra practitioners. That would be one of the multiple forms of the goddess for Shakta Tantra practitioners and so forth. Similarly in Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, when you practice Tantra, when you are a Tantric practitioner, and usually you wouldn't go around and advertise that, it would be your private thing, when you are a real Tantra practitioner or an aspiring Tantra practitioner, and that's the category to which we will temporarily all belong for the duration of the session. We're aspiring Tantra practitioners, when you belong to that category, you work with a specific Buddha figure or specific meditational deity that is your personal private window into your own deepest nature. And in the Tibetan Buddhist world, most people would have initiations, would have received initiations into sometimes hundreds of those meditational deities, or at least a few dozen. So any Tibetan grandmother, travel to Kathmandu, you would go to the Bodhanath Stupa, which is one of the biggest, most important Buddhist stupas in the world, very easily accessible. In Kathmandu, one of the hearts of the Tibetan Buddhist world. You go there, there's some coffee places around, lots of nice little souvenir shops, some nice restaurants. But around the stupa, you would see literally hundreds of people walking around all day reciting their mantras, quite a lot of Nepali and Tibetan grandmothers. And look at any Tibetan grandmother, you can definitely say each one of them has received dozens or hundreds of empowerments or initiations into these different tantric systems of practice. So not just Vaitara, but also the Buddha of compassion, medicine Buddha, Buddha of infinite light, wrathful practices, peaceful practices, desirous practices, and so forth. All these different deities they have received transmissions for. And then depending on what one's individual connections, propensities, inclinations are, one would either practice a few of those at the same time or just focus on one, or as it happens with Westerners in this day and age, try to practice everything at the same time and then kind of crash and burn a bit because, oh, it's too much, I'm overwhelmed, I'm just going to give it all up. So you can at the same time look into multiple windows into your own enlightened nature, practice multiple mantras, multiple deities. Traditionally, though, eventually when you arrive at the higher levels of practice, you would just choose one practice and focus on one practice at a time until you actually break through into that practice. And Vaitara is a perfect example of that. It is a practice that is at the same time extremely simple by comparison, not simple compared to mindfulness of breathing, for example, but simple when compared to other systems of tantric practice, because Vaitara looks like a human lady with two hands, 2 arms, 1 face, 2 legs. So she's kind of fairly simple to visualize in that regard, whereas some meditational deities have thousands of arms, and some meditation deities have 42 arms and so forth. Many, many, many arms to visualize. That's complex. Each arm is holding a different thing. That's all. It all has symbolic meaning. It's not just visualizing aliens. It all has symbolic graphic meaning that's encoded, and we meditate on that to activate the corresponding mental states. But the more we have to visualize, the more complex it becomes. So for a beginner, especially with Western background, to go into one of those practices in which you're supposed to visualize 24 arms and 6 or 8 faces and multiple legs, and it's all very, very bizarre and has multiple colors and so forth, that's not very easy. It's a bit hard to relate to. It's hard to understand the meaning behind it all, to learn that meaning, even if you have a nice guide or a very qualified teacher. Whereas with Vaitara, okay, she's fairly simple to visualize. The practice itself is relatively simple in terms of the steps that are there to it. The mantra is relatively simple to memorize. The logic of it all is easy to explain, relatively easy. So for that reason, many people turn to such a practice, and not just Westerners. Historically, there have been many, even monastics, who did this practice and focused on it as their primary one. Lots of Tibetan grandmothers and grandfathers focus on it as their primary one. So it is a relatively simple practice, but at the same time, it contains all the elements of the path. And for that reason, it is employed by some people as their main practice for progressing towards full awakening and then eventually experiencing it. So Vaitara practice can be done as a Tantra practice that you do until you eventually become realized. So you gain different stages of realization and eventually you gain full awakening. Not that it's going to happen in this specific workshop right now. We don't want to overpromise, but over time, if you practice for some decades, really deeply, really accumulate all the aspects, you might progress through the stages of the path and experience eventually high degrees of realization. So that's definitely possible when practicing such a method. So that's one reason for why people practice Vaitara, to become enlightened, like Vaitara did herself. But at the same time, Vaitara practice has a more technical application, or a more practical application in a way, more pragmatic reason for why people do it. Vaitara as a meditational deity symbolically represents qualities of longevity, good health, abundance of merit or good karma, and abundance of wisdom. And of course, we do need good karma and wisdom on the path, and just in general, a good idea to have those. Would you rather be richly endowed with good karma that makes all your wishes manifest or come true, and endowed with a lot of wisdom and a lot of discerning intelligence that really gives you that clarity of mind, or be devoid of good karma, so nothing good ever happens in your life, you're constantly miserable, and then be extremely dull in terms of your intellectual strength. Like really, you're like 2 + 2, I really have no idea. It might be 6, I don't know. So kind of like extremely dull in terms of that discerning quality of our mind. Well, we would probably want to have all the good things, right, and not be devoid of them. So for that reason, multiplying or kind of bringing in more of that is one reason for why Tara practice is done, but especially for longevity and good health, because everyone, of course, wants to be healthy, and no one really wants to be sick all the time. And in terms of longevity, yes, in this day and age, many people start saying, "Oh, I wish I was dead," So that's not uncommon. But historically, people were more often likely to say, "Yes, well, if I can live up to 80 and be healthy and sound in mind and healthy in my body, why not?" So they would do such practices for that reason, and for those who are actively bringing benefit to others through activism or teaching or providing medical services and so forth, they would apply these methods to live longer, to be able to benefit more beings. And similarly, just simply those who are on the path towards full awakening would want to live longer so that they might gain more realizations in this life before they have to get reborn, get a whole other body, then study everything again and kind of start practicing from where they left off. Why not do it right now instead of waiting for the next rebirth? So that's another reason for why such practices are done. White Tower practice can also be used as a practice that's done for health and longevity of others. So some people would do it to develop their ability to heal others, or simply as kind of a healing prayer or healing meditation for others. And it would also be done for the longevity of others. For example, if you have a spiritual teacher that's really important to you, and this teacher is incredibly beneficial to this world, they're bringing wisdom and compassion into the lives of so many beings, you would often do White Tara practice for their longevity, to create causes and conditions so that they live longer and so they bring benefit to this world. So today, January the 1st, in Bodh Gaya, once again, there was a long life offering to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where people from all the different Buddhist traditions of Tibet, but also from some other Buddhist traditions as well, came together. They did a powerful White Tara practice, and they said, "Please, Your Holiness, live long to continue spreading wisdom and compassion." So it's very common to do that for really any particularly high teacher, for your own teacher, and sometimes on some occasions, everyone comes together to do that for one person in particular. So these are some of the more practical applications. White Tara practice is done for longevity, for good health, for healing, for multiplying our merit if we really feel that we're lacking good karma and everything seems to be going wrong in our life, and for strengthening our wisdom as well. And wisdom, of course, is very powerfully important on the Buddhist path, because essentially all of Buddhist practices, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, boil down to the cultivation of two primary qualities: compassion, which includes love and empathetic joy and equanimous openness. So the side of compassion and love, and the side of wisdom and discernment. If we keep cultivating those, eventually they will come together and bring us full awakening, and that's why we do it all. We strengthen the continuities, the tantras of compassion and of wisdom, until they merge together into the unbroken continuity of full awakening. So that's kind of the general idea, the general sequence of steps here. So we work with the form of White Tara, with the mantra of White Tara, with the wisdom of White Tara, as it's sometimes described. But before going into those, just kind of a brief explanation for why people do visualizations practices and all of that in Tibetan Buddhism and in Buddhism in general, because that's another point that has a lot of confusion associated with it. First of all, that thing that I've already mentioned. Or why do people do offerings? Why do people walk around stupas? Why do people recite mantras? Shouldn't they just be meditating instead? Shouldn't just be mindfully observing their breath, or just resting in non-duality, or removing all the thoughts from the mind, or just thinking, oh, everything is non-dual, so nothing I do matters, everything is one, blah, blah, blah. Kind of, shouldn't we be doing all of those sorts of things? Well, not really from a Buddhist point of view, because Buddhism always talks about the so-called two truths: ultimate and relative, or ultimate and conventional. When the Dalai Lama gives teachings on Buddhism, he always starts with that, actually, before presenting any other Buddhist topic, before talking about anything related to that kind of profound nature or Vaitara, really anything else, he always emphasizes, because Westerners or people of the modern world are quite intelligent, quite well educated, they know about quantum physics and things like that, it would be best for them to first hear about these two truths, understand them to a certain degree, and then consider all these other topics. So these so-called two truths are the truth about what we perceive in this reality, all the tables and, you know, bodies and feet and dogs and everything else that we see around us, and then the ultimate nature of all of that, which is what is in Buddhism called emptiness, absence of independent existence, and things like that. So if we are a Buddhist practitioner, we have to be sort of equally mindful of both of these. The conventional realm in which we find ourselves with our actions, with our thoughts, with our words, with our bodies, mantras, visualizations, movements of the body, asanas, pranayamas, that all belongs to the conventional realm. And then the true nature of it all, the fact that it's all empty of independent existence, emptiness. So at the same time, both. What happens with Vaitara practice is that we work with the conventional aspect of things by doing prayers, by visualizing, by reciting mantras, by using some breathing exercises, by using movement and so forth. It's all woven into that. We weave this whole thing associated with Vaitara, centered on Vaitara as the hub. And then eventually, after we have done all that, we go into the emptiness aspect of it all, and we rest, we dwell in that emptiness in our meditation. And then we go back to the conventional, and then we go back to the empty, and we kind of vacillate, we move between the two to deepen both aspects of our mind, the one that can perceive the conventional reality accurately, and the one that can perceive the emptiness of it all. What happens sometimes, quite mistakenly, is that people think, oh, the only thing that matters probably is this emptiness thing, the absence of independent existence. Why? Well, because I'm so fed up with this world. I'm so fed up with feet and dogs and bodies and visualizations and all of it, you know, the samsara. I'm so sick of it that I'm just going to go into the emptiness or the non-duality level of things. And when we do that, when we let go of the conventional truth altogether, we end up in nihilism. And we end up with this nihilistic view that nothing matters, it's all non-dual, doesn't matter what I do, you know, I can be, you know, gross and horrible and rapey and all that. And that's kind of, it's really what happens. It's really what happens in multiple communities, and people really fall into that extreme, which from a Buddhist point of view is a horrible mistake to make, because if you make that, there's the famous saying that if you fall into the extreme of eternalism, which is when you're only focused on the conventional realm and you think, oh, it all really exists as it appears to me, right? You know, these walls and everything, and probably myself is a fixed entity somewhere within me. It's all fixed and permanent and real. That's pretty bad. It's not accurate. It's not an accurate perception of reality. But at least with that, you are probably going to try to create positive causes and conditions there. So if you're focused on this internalist view where you're only seeing the conventional reality and you don't consider the fact that it is all like a dream and so forth, you're not going to get liberated. But at least you have a chance of still establishing positive causality in this realm, you know, in samsara. Whereas if you fall into the extreme of nihilism, where you go into this thing of emptiness and you think, oh, it's all so empty that nothing I do matters and I can do whatever therefore. It said, in that case, you will not even see a good rebirth. You will not even create causes for a good rebirth, let alone liberation, because you're now denying everything. You're falling into this extreme. You're just thinking, oh, it's all non-dual, doesn't matter, you know, and that's completely useless. So the ideal scenario, of course, is to combine the two and follow what in Buddhism is described as the middle way of seeing both truths and skillfully dealing with both of them, knowing how to create positive causes and conditions in this conventional realm where we all find ourselves as these people with these names, with these bodies, with these identities, and at the same time see through it all, knowing that it is all like a dream, and then at some point become lucid in this dream, while at the same time navigating this lucid dream that we're finding ourselves in. So that is, in a way, a very simplified expression of what first the realized beings and then the beings who gain full awakening experience. They gradually become more and more and more lucid in this dream that for us is the totality of reality. And just like in a lucid dream that we can actually experience if we practice lucid dreaming or dream yoga, eventually, as we develop those degrees of lucidity, we can manipulate the dream, we can fly in the dream, we can walk through walls and so forth, and we can interact with the beings in that dream with greater degree of skillfulness and freedom. And at the same time, the dream does not necessarily disappear. It's still there, and we're just having fun with it. So those realized beings attain the same thing with regards to this reality, conventional reality that we're finding ourselves in. So when Vaitara practice is done, or any similar tantric practice is done, on the one hand, we're developing that lucidity and skillfulness in dealing with this reality. That's actually what allows us to increase our longevity, playing with the conventional aspects of it. But at the same time, they see through it all, they see that it's all empty, it is like a dream, and eventually they gain the realization of non-duality as well. So you gain both, the conventional and the ultimate. And falling into just one of the two extremes is a horrible mistake to avoid in this whole system of practice, which is why Buddhists do study philosophy and things like that. Whole purpose behind studying philosophical treatises and finding different ways to meditate on emptiness, but also on interdependent existence and so forth, is to avoid these two extremes so that our meditation is done properly. Otherwise, we will make mistakes in the meditation and it will lead us to certain problems. So suffice it to say, it is a thing, Vaitara practice that is. It is a thing that can be done in a very simple way. You can literally open a nice guided meditation on Vaitara and listen to it. And you are a Vaitara practitioner from that point of view. As long as you're listening to this meditation, you are doing Vaitara practice, potentially even every day. But at the same time, there's about 40 billion things to study and to kind of perfect there. And that all comes with time. So what happens to some people kind of in this day and age is that they think, oh, well, might as well go to a Buddhist event somewhere. There's a Buddhist center somewhere in my city, hopefully a good one, because there are some really strange places to avoid, but hopefully a good one, and there are many, many valid, truly valid Buddhist communities, networks, systems, organizations. So hopefully you have like a nice community somewhere in your city and you're like, oh, they're having a Vaitara event, I'm going to go to it. Not the one that we're having right now, but let's say a lama, an actually qualified tantric master comes and transmits a Vaitara empowerment, an initiation into the deeper levels of Vaitara practice that we're not going to go into today. So you go there, you're like, la-di-da-di-da, might as well sit through the ceremony. So you go through the ceremony, you follow the visualization and the meditations that you're supposed to do. And through that, you receive a Vaitara empowerment or an initiation into this practice, into the deeper levels of it. And then you think, okay, well, this is my first encounter with Buddhism. I really don't know anything about philosophy or any of that, but it was fun. The mantra seems fun, like this white lady seems fun, Vaitara herself. So I might as well start doing that. And then slowly through working with it all, you assemble all those missing pieces of even understanding what is Buddhist philosophy and how does Buddha interpret reality and what is his view of self or no self and things like that. And over time, after 40 years of doing that, you become a Vaitara practitioner proper, par excellence, where you have assembled all these preliminary components and you can do it all properly with a lot of powerful effects for your body and mind. So people start with all of this in very different ways, and there's no one particular proper way to do it. So it's not to say, okay, if Vaitara practice is so complex, I should just leave the workshop right now. I'll go back to the beginning. I'll pick up a copy of Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions there, the reception, and I'll start with chapter one where they talk about the foundations of Buddhist philosophy. And in about 30 years, I'll come back, Sangye Yoga Studio, and I'll attend another Vaitara workshop, and that's where my Vaitara practice work will begin. No, it's not like that. You can be introduced to it from any point. Many people just find a random Vaitara meditation on Insight Timer and things like that, and they start meditating with it, and then everything else kind of comes your way as well. But it's important to know there are a lot of things to know, and at the same time, we can start practicing with Vaitara right away. So we will do a Vaitara meditation to see how all of that weaving is being done. But before that, a note on why Buddhists use these techniques of visualization and so forth, or what is a good way of thinking about it from a psychological point of view. One of the great Buddhist masters of our time just passed away last week. Today's Monday, so I guess last week. He was an incredible translator who's done a lot of work on translating many texts, but also an incredible teacher who very profoundly influenced my own practice as well. He was primarily working in Cambridge in the United States, so I guess that's Harvard University, Tulku Thondup Rinpoche. And he had a very beautiful way of talking about the psychology of all these methods that involve visualization and so forth. Basically, they're all used to connect our mind to these profound qualities of wisdom and compassion that we need on the path, right? So everything is done to strengthen either wisdom or compassion, or such things as concentration, which underpin wisdom and compassion. So he would say that we use visualizations and things like that, and also mantras and different breathing techniques to strengthen wisdom and compassion. But to arrive at that goal, to make sure our visualization techniques are truly powerful, that they have that effect that we want them to have, we need to make sure that there are 4 psychological factors present in our practice. So he would describe them in the following way. And that's really a logic that can be applied to any visualization technique that is not necessarily Buddhist at all. Jungian work and just really any visualization practices can be seen through the same lens. So the four elements that we need to have, and when we do Vaitara practice now, we will apply all 4 of those. We need to have, first of all, positive images. Since it's a visualization practice, we need to have some images. So even visualizing things like white light, or golden sun, or some beautiful flowers, these can all be positive images. Positive in what sense? Positive in that they represent something that is wholesome, something that is good, something that is virtuous, something that is constructive. And in Buddhism, positive or wholesome or constructive is defined as that which leads to sustainable well-being for us and for all who live. So anything that we visualize that has that healing effect on our mind, that makes our mind more noble, more wholesome, more constructive, more wise, more compassionate, that is a positive image. If we visualize something that makes our mind more neurotic, that is kind of a non-positive image or a negative image. So from that point of view, visualizing things that just make us more, that strengthen our craving, for example, that's not really a positive type of practice. Whereas something that makes our mind more balanced, more patient, more kind, more content, more wise, more discerning, more concentrated, these are all good things. So Vaitara is an example of such a visualization. She is a symbol of the unity of wisdom and compassion. That's why we visualize her. Then that's just not, that alone is not enough, because let's say you're sitting there, you're imagining this white lady sitting in front of you, and then what? What good is that? What good is that? How is that going to help me? So because just visualizing something symbolic is not enough, you also need to have the second element, and that is positive thoughts. Positive thoughts, once again, are described as thoughts that lead to sustainable happiness and well-being, so that they have a healing, balancing effect on our mind, and they work because they are usually, once again, associated with either wisdom or compassion. So in that practice, you would then be thinking such thoughts as, may all beings be free from suffering. That is the thought of compassion. May all beings have happiness. That is the thought of loving kindness. Or may I open to the qualities of Vaitara and be inspired by them. That is a thought of devotion, as it's called in Buddhism. Or may I bring benefit to all who live. That is a thought of skillful action, and so forth. So all of these thoughts that either involve some aspiration or involve a correct interpretation of reality, or that help us open up to the inspiring influence of Vaitara's image and so forth, these are all wholesome thoughts. So even thinking, may there be peace on this planet, that's a positive thought. So it is a very valuable addition to positive images that we have already established. So positive images associated with something virtuous, positive thoughts, which include in them these wholesome mental states, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, patience, contentment, and so forth. And then the third one is positive feelings. That means that when we do these practices, it's not enough to just visualize something and then think like a robot, may all beings be happy. We also need to feel something. But feeling here does not mean that we're swept away by some divine experience of, sentimentality, which is what happens to some people, but that's kind of not perfectly ideal. It, for example, means feeling openness or peace or relaxation or a certain degree of heartfelt warmth. Any of these different things that just are, once again, associated with happiness, with wholesomeness, with goodness. Any of those feelings, when we bring them into such a practice, make the practice stronger. And then for the fourth element, that's the one that's usually missing for us initially. Tulku Thondup Rinpoche defines this as trust. So we visualize something, we think these good thoughts, we maybe feel a certain degree of contentment or warmth and openness and all these sorts of things. And then we also need to trust the fact that the practice is working. We need to trust the fact that my meditation right now, this 20-minute session that I'm doing by attending this class in Sangye Yoga Studio or listening to a guided meditation on Insight Timer and so forth, or by reading a Vaitara practice text out loud and then doing what's described there. I need to feel that to trust that this practice is actually working in some ways. It's sowing some seeds. It's changing the fabric of my mind. It's changing my inner landscape slowly, slowly. And over time, if I repeat it 100,000 times or 1 billion times, the changes will become very, very profound. So the analogy that's given there is by one of my teachers, Lama Chunam, is that we kind of trust it like we trust our washing machine. So when you put laundry into your washing machine and you add the detergent and you start the cycle, you kind of implicitly know that at the end of the cycle, your clothes are going to be at least a bit more clean than when they went in. You're not expecting that they're necessarily always going to be perfectly clean, right? Because there sometimes are there are stains that are hard to remove and you might need to do a few cycles or do something else. But generally, they're going to be coming out more clean than when they went in. So the exactly same logic is applied to Tantra practices and to such meditations, meditation on Vaitara. After you have completed the practice, and as you're doing it, you need to trust the fact that your mind will emerge just a tiny bit more kind, more wise, more compassionate, more calm, more content than when it went in. So when you have that trust, it removes some of the psychological inner barriers that would render the practice ineffective. It is very important for Tantra practices in general, Vaitara practice included, to have a certain degree of openness and trust, because if we do very strongly believe, oh, it's not going to work, it's not going to have any effect on my mind, it's all useless, it's all nonsense, I'm just here because cat made me come, and I don't trust any of it. If we have that attitude, well, there will be no change, because it's just that attitude itself that's blocking our progress, that's blocking any potential change. But to develop that trust, of course, we need to, over time, assemble all these different aspects of understanding of how do these things work, what is Buddhist philosophy, how do the mantras work on our mind and body and speech, why they're recited, who is the Buddha, who is Vaitara, who are all these people, blah, 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 blah. Learning all of that establishes faith, as it's called in Buddhism, that is intelligent because it is not blind. It relies on our knowledge, understanding, experience, conviction, things like that. And the more that faith grows, the more effective these practices become. But some people naturally have a propensity towards faith. Buddhism sometimes has these classifications of different individuals, and depending on which category you belong to, you would be more suited for different types of practices. And if you are a faith-oriented individual, an individual for whom faith really comes naturally and easily, you would need to be on the lookout for any charlatans, because you're more likely to be misguided by someone's charisma, and you're more likely to end up in a cult, really. But at the same time, if you find a genuine practice, like a genuine practice of Vaitara that does not require, for you to give up everything and move into a bunker in Ohio or something like that, if you find a practice like that, that practice will be more effective for you than it would be for someone who's extremely skeptical and rational, is like doubting everything. So we all have those different propensities, but over time we try to balance it all out. So if we are more in the skeptical, oh, I don't trust anything kind of things, well, we try to open up to such things as Vaitara practice, because really it's all internal. It's our own inner work. It does not rely on Kat or Lobsang or the studio or anything else, really. Once you have received the instructions and maybe some transmission and so forth, it's all your inner alchemy. So it works depending on your own mind. So from that point of view, opening up to that does not mean being stupid or, a simpleton or trusting wrong people and wrong things. No, it's just inner alchemy that we perform ourselves. But if we are more on the faith side, that trust will come naturally to us. But for us, it then will be good to understand, what are these positive images and how do they work? What are these positive thoughts? What are these positive feelings? What's the logic behind it all? Because we don't want to end up in a situation where we're doing it all, but we have no understanding of what's happening. We just follow the movements blindly, and we think, okay, that should work. That sounds fun. So balancing it all out, finding that middle way at all times is the way we do it. So hopefully that's enough of a kind of general context to perform a Vaitara meditation, which will involve positive images, positive thoughts, positive feelings, hopefully some trust, and a little bit of Vaitara's mantra. But before we do it, of course, it's always nice to stretch because you've been sitting and becoming more and more sad for almost an hour. So please do feel free to stretch and then to find a comfortable meditation position. This is not yet the Yoga Nidra part. We will get to that a bit later. So this is more of an upright meditation, and then we'll do a Nidra at the end. Sure. Well, since everyone left, if anyone has any questions about anything that we've discussed so far, I'm happy to use this time to answer. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So I'm just going to repeat for the people online. So the question is, when you see someone seemingly becoming nihilistic, how do you avoid judgment and criticism, knowing that potentially this could actually be a highly realized bodhisattva and you don't know, but it seems like they're getting into nihilism? Well, to be fair, that point about them potentially being a high bodhisattva really applies to everyone, no matter what they're doing, as in really asking ourselves, well, who is a bodhisattva and who is not? Who is a Buddha? Who is just a magical manifestation of a Buddha? You know, we have no way of proving that Mao or Stalin and people like them were not actually magical emanations of Buddhism, just performing these acts to help humans wake up, you know, things like that. Oh, yeah, sort of that sort of thing. And that is one way of playing with it intellectually. We could explore that and think about it. But it's also helpful to not get lost in that too much, because if we only do that kind of thing prematurely, if we only think, oh, it's all magical play of the Buddhas, in Tantra, that's an important view, so-called pure vision. But prematurely, we don't want to go too deeply into that extreme until we have perfected the more conventional side of our behavior. So it is one way of thinking about it, but the more helpful thing there is to not think about the person, but think about the actions and the view. Even if they are a highly realized bodhisattva, that's just displaying that for our sake, perhaps, and that is why a bodhisattva would display that to teach us a lesson. The lesson that they're displaying by seemingly sliding into nihilism and things like that is a lesson in us being able to discern, oh, that's actually a nihilistic view. That's not good. So we can criticize the view, without fully fusing it with the person themselves, right? So there's this joke that I heard many years ago, and I think it's deeply true. If you if you can't be an inspiring example, you can always be a horrifying warning. So maybe that is a bodhisattva that instead of showing us an inspiring example, is showing us a horrifying warning. But the view of nihilism that they're displaying is not correct in that it does not accord with the nature of reality, which we can logically prove by exploring the two truths and learning about them, or reading pith instructions from such masters as Padmasambhava and so forth, and seeing, oh, they are all actually emphasizing this union of two truths, equal attention or detailed attention, proper attention to conventional reality, and of course, gaining that view of boundless ultimate reality as well. So we can play with that and think, okay, maybe that is a bodhisattva, but the view itself is wrong. And I'm not going to let myself go into that. And if I can contribute to the proper view of the union of two truths being strengthened in this world, if I can contribute to that somehow, so that we all take responsibility for our actions, but at the same time see the flexibility of reality and its kind of illusory nature, that's a meaningful way to spend my life. Whereas promoting just one of the two extremes would probably not be best from the Buddhist point of view. So we think of the view, we kind of remove the person from the equation temporarily, and then we think, oh, is this a proper view? Same with actions, really. We don't know, of course, we don't know who anybody is, but we can say, oh, this action of, harming civilians and so forth, or killing or stealing or and all those sorts of things, that's not good. So I myself will make a very strong aspiration to never do those actions, to never, well, certainly to never perform those actions under the influence of a negative motivation, and just in general to avoid all the compulsions that come from my negative mental states. So we strengthen our motivation when we see negative things. So to give an example, His Holiness every day listens to BBC News, as many people would know. So he starts his day by listening to the news. And then he says, well, it's a wonderful teaching on karma, really, because you hear about what's happening in this world, and these people have been killed, and this is happening there, and this is happening there. But it's not a lesson on karma, meaning, oh, I guess it was their karma to be killed. Oh, I guess it was their karma to win the lottery. Oh, I guess it was his karma to become the next president of the United States, or something like that. It is all true, but from the other point of view, the bodhisattvas interpret as, okay, this is an invitation for me to become even more compassionate. This is an invitation for me to become even more loving towards all these groups of beings who are either suffering or are happy or in a kind of a neutral state right now. I think we're all back, so let's just do some White Tower meditation. This is going to be a relatively brief one, because we're also going to do the Yoga Nidra style one later. But finding a comfortable stationary position, making sure our body is comfortable, elongating our spine if necessary, or if it's okay for us and for our body. Relaxing the shoulders, slightly tucking in our chin. Choosing whether to keep our eyes open or hooded or closed. Making sure our hands are resting comfortably on our lap or on our knees or on our thighs. And then bringing our awareness into the domain of tactile sensations. Noticing our contact with the ground that's holding us, relaxing our feet, our toes, the outer side of our legs or the back side of our legs. And then our shoulders, our hands and fingers, and our face. Allowing our breath to move naturally. enjoying that process of natural breathing where each exhalation is washing all the types of tension away, removing all the knots of tension in our body and mind. And while still breathing naturally and actually allowing our body to go deeper and deeper into that state of relaxation with each exhalation, we start using our mind to weave constructive mental states that are aligned with the nature of Vaitara. And the first one that we need here is, once again, a vast and deep motivation, such as the wish to fully wake up for the benefit of all beings, to become fully and irreversibly lucid. And we quite literally establish that wish in our mind and we breathe life into it. May I become a fully awakened being for the benefit of all who live. I am doing Vaitara practice to arrive at that wakefulness. And then with that in the background of our mind, we use our mind's luminous or clear quality as opposed to its knowing quality, its ability to know and to be aware. Which means we use our imagination, our ability to see things, feel things. And here we are invited to feel and see ourselves as temporarily being in a pure dimension of reality where we are surrounded by natural beauty. We imagine ourselves sitting on a vast verdant field with majestic mountains in the distance, with beautiful streams of water, majestic trees, blue sky above us, rainbows in that sky. A pure realm of Tara. And all these aspects of natural beauty that we're imagining just represent the pristine purity of our own innermost mind, of our own Buddha nature. Different facets of our wisdom and compassion. And to make it more focused, to have a very clear window into our deepest nature, we imagine Waitara herself. So in the space in front of us, in that vast open blue sky, we imagine a fresh and fragrant lotus flower that's just floating in space. Above it, a flat moon disk, soft like a cushion. And on that moon disk, we imagine White Tara herself as a beautiful, snow-white, youthful goddess that is sitting in the full lotus position with her back straight, her right hand on her right knee, palm up or towards us, her left hand at her heart, and with a thumb and ring finger of her left hand, she holds the stem of a blue flower that's blooming next to her ear. She's adorned with silk clothes, with jeweled ornaments of different kind, 3 necklaces, armlets, bracelets, anklets, earrings. Her face is youthful, compassionate, smiling, playful. On her face, she has 3 eyes gazing at us and all the other sentient beings at the same time. And traditionally, we would also imagine that there is an eye on each of her palms and on her feet as well. So altogether, she has 7 eyes that see the experiences of all sentient beings at the same time. But what's important, if these details of visualization seem a bit complex right now, is to simply feel the wise and compassionate presence of our own pristine nature manifesting as this radiant snow-like form. And this visual form, a positive image quite literally, is a window into our own basic goodness, our Buddha nature. It is a form of our own future awakening. When we fully wake up, we will be able to manifest as Vaitara when necessary. And it also a form that manifests for our well-being right now on the basis of the enlightened mind of all the Buddhas and realized beings and of our own teachers in this life. So even if we have not yet met any heart teachers or special teachers that would take responsibility for our awakening, teachers that we would entrust ourselves to, even if we have not met such teachers or recognized them, we can think that they are already manifesting in this form, and that is our way of communicating with them right now through Vaitara. They're manifesting this form to help us strengthen our wisdom and compassion already. So that's positive imagery. For positive thoughts, we remind ourselves Tara is a symbol of unified wisdom and love, wisdom and compassion. Through working with her form, may I myself uncover boundless wisdom and compassion, wisdom and love as well. And because wisdom and love are qualities of Tara's mind, in this way we're connecting to Tara's mind, the qualities of Tara's mind as well. For positive feelings, we can simply experience a sense of opening up to our own deeper potential. We can feel a wave of warmth coming from Tara to inspire us, to guide us, to help us, to hold us. Or we can simply feel good about the fact that we do have that basic goodness, that deeper potential. And if possible, we can even add a wish, an aspiration for all beings to eventually wake up to their Tara nature. We add the element of trust by feeling or thinking, well, all of these facets of practice do sow positive seeds in my mind. Seeds of love and compassion, seeds of pure vision, seeds of openness, seeds of clarity. So when I emerge from this meditation a bit later, my mind will be somewhat transformed. And not just my mind, but also the outer interdependence within which I exist. Because visualizing Vaitara, who represents longevity, health, merit, wisdom, will strengthen those positive things in my life, in my karmic field, in my personal streams of causes and conditions. And to express that all of these things in the vocal form, Vaitara practitioners, those who temporarily rely on Vaitara, would often chant, intone, or quietly recite one of her mantras, and she has quite a few, some of them more well known than others, but for simplicity, here it is enough for us, if we want to chant Tara's shortest two-syllable mantra, which is just her name in the vocative case. So Tara, which is her name, becomes Tare, which is calling out to her. Translated roughly is, "Oh Tara, hear me." And we just chant that, if we want, for a tiny bit, feeling that the vibration of that pervades every cell in our body, every corner of our mind, every aspect of our interdependent field. Tare, 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 tare. So returning to the aspect of positive feelings, we can still feel the energetic quality of this mantra deep within our body, in our prana field, and in our mind. But perhaps we want to go even deeper to truly experience the qualities of Tara from the inside out and to connect to the ultimate nature as well. So this is where we imagine Tara coming to the crown of our head, facing the same direction as us. We passionately implore her to grant us the indivisibility with her body, speech, and mind. And we imagine that her form melts into a cloud of white light that absorbs into us through our crown. And this is where we let go of all the images, all the thoughts of our very own sense of identity, and we simply rest in a state of union without a reference point. With the subliminal feeling of our body, speech, and mind, Tara's body, speech, and mind, and the body, speech, and mind of all the genuine teachers in this world being one. And from that, we emerge with the final part of this meditation, where we first dedicate the positive energy of this practice so that it would never dissipate, thinking, through this, may I indeed become fully awakened, and may I indeed strengthen the qualities of longevity, good health, merit, and wisdom for the well-being of all who live. And then we return to our body, noticing the sensations. Introduce some movement to the body gently, rocking back and forth, moving our fingers and toes. And we slowly conclude the practice. So as you can see, I didn't lie to you in that we did do some mental weaving. Imagined a form, we reminded ourselves of the qualities woven into it, and we tried to connect to those qualities using our body, because it's resting in the meditation position. In some practices, we would also do mudras and things like that. That's also a way of engaging our body, or even do prostrations and things like that. There are many ways of doing it. There are some breathing exercises associated with the Vaitara. So all of that eventually can come into the fold as well. And for our speech, we use the mantra that has a certain vibrational quality to it that over time can affect us, and especially our subtle nervous system, very powerfully. Initially, when we recite like 3 mantras, or 10 mantras or 21 mantras, yes, the effect is not very strong, but for people who have done hundreds of thousands of Vaitara mantras or millions of Vaitara mantras, the effect is very profound in that there's a very profound transformation in the breathing pattern, in the way your nervous system acts, and then, of course, in how your mind works as well. It becomes more wise, more compassionate, more clear, and so forth. That's why mantras are done in this tradition. And then with regards to our mind, we try to generate those thoughts of wisdom, compassion, love, aspiration to connect to Vaitara's qualities and aspiration to share those qualities with others. That's all profound inner work, actually, because not that many people on this planet right now who are sitting there and thinking, oh, may I bring wisdom and compassion to everyone in this world. We're mostly thinking about trivial things or bad things. How do we kill more of these people or those people? Or how do we cheat? How do we lie? How do we sell more cigarettes and things like that? So we did something very unique from the point of view, of statistics in a way. And then we rested in an approximation to non-duality, an approximation to emptiness or to true nature. Yes, it was not an actual bare experience of non-duality yet, but through assembling these things and practicing all these different aspects over time, that will also emerge in its starkness and its bareness and its openness. And then we dedicate the positive energy of this so that it would never get dissipated, so that it would keep growing, and eventually we would all become indeed awakened like Tara herself. So that's kind of the basic pattern of it. This is an outer form of Tara practice. Outer in that everyone is welcome to do it, even if you don't have any special transmissions or anything like that. Quite literally, use any valid white Tara guided meditation, or follow a text that describes these steps, or guide yourself in it. And already right there, you're using white Tara practice, and it will affect your mind over time. Can just have a pacifying effect in that you feel more peaceful, calming effect. It can be done as a sort of a prayer for the well-being of others, or it can be done with that aspiration to become awakened. And then there are inner forms of Tara practice, which you can start doing once you have received all the necessary transmissions from truly qualified masters. So you would traditionally get either white Tara empowerment or a sequence of white Tara empowerments, some reading transmissions and so forth, some instructions on these types of practices. And then you would start using those, you would visualize not white Tara in the space in front of you or above you and so on. These are more pertinent to outer practice, to outer types of practices, but you would actually visualize your own energy manifesting as white Tara. You would imagine yourself as white Tara. Vaitara's mantra will become your speech. Vaitara's mind will become your mind, and you will be practicing with it until one day that faking till you make it thing turns into actually being Vaitara, real, or at least as realized as Vaitara. So there are some great masters living in this world who have done incredible amounts of Vaitara practice, realized it, and then transmitted to others. And it's totally possible to connect to them and receive those transmissions. I'm not trying to squeeze it all in, and there are quite a few points that could be added, but on my YouTube channel, I have a whole presentation that we did with Tibet House, New York City, about the history of Vaitara's lineage and these different transmissions that you can receive and how it all works. So I'm not gonna try to squeeze it all into these 2 hours. Instead, we're doing something very practical. We talked about like the 4 points, positive images and so forth, how to apply it, how does it all fit in into tantric practice. And now arriving at the Yoga Nidra part, which is very welcome. I can see by your sleepy eyes. So on the Yoga Nidra part, just a tiny preliminary to that. Of course, um, kind of Yoga Nidra has become a very vast field right now, right? And historically, even not going into the history of that, it was a vast variety of slightly different practices presented in slightly different ways. But in a way, Yoga Nidra can refer to really any proper meditation that we do on our back while being deeply relaxed. That's one way of describing it. So in some ways, that's exactly what we're going to do. But Vaitara practice, or the system Vaitara practice, has special instructions on sleep yoga, or what to do as you're falling asleep and then sleeping and then waking up. And that's what I'm going to draw from when guiding this meditation. But another thing that I'm going to draw from is a unique system of instructions that is inbuilt into Vaitara practice and that is used for healing purposes. So that actually comes from a great female Indian master by the name of Sitarani. Tibetans call her Machik Drupe Gyalmo, single mother Sitarani. And she transmitted those to the great adept Rinpoche, who then brought it into Tibet, and in Tibet it's spread out across multiple traditions and multiple systems of practice. And in this specific set of instructions that comes from this great yogini, we work with the 5 elements within our body to balance them and therefore to establish health and well-being. So sometimes you would be assisted in that by a qualified practitioner of Tibetan medicine or Ayurveda or Chinese medicine. They would try from outside through herbal medicine and massage and things like that to help you balance the elements in the body and mind. And sometimes you do that through meditation. And ideally you do both. You're taking those horrible tasting pills, you're being massaged and things like that. You're doing exercise, you're watching your diet, and at the same time, you're meditating to rebalance the 5 elements in your body and mind as well. And all together, it brings this wholesome vision of greater well-being. So Vaitara practice includes special visualizations for that, so we're going to do them in this Yoga Nidra practice. But before that, 1 minute of stretching within this room. I would keep them on just in terms of protecting ourselves from some of the snoring that might occur. So just in case, of course, you would ideally close your eyes. Also, a little consent note. If you do start snoring, your neighbors have your consent to gently touch your shoulder or your wrist just to make sure, or your feet. That's okay. Well, there's an instruction on that as well. And we're invited to think all the sounds are the sound of Vaitara's mantra. So it's an exercise in positive interpretation. Oh, something's being loud. Oh, it's just Vaitara's mantra humming in that pleasant way right next to me. Yeah. But yes, also feel free to take all the blankets you might need, all the bolsters, really anything else that might support your body. And if there's no objections, we will just go 5 minutes over time. Otherwise, it's going to be a very short Yoga Nidra. So we'll go all the way up to 5:05, if that's okay. Yes, if you're at home, joining through Zoom, please feel free to also lie down. Your camera can be on or off, doesn't matter, as long as you're comfortable. So gradually arriving at this comfortable position. The Buddha actually encouraged us to meditate in the supine position as well. He said that meditation can be done while sitting upright, or lying down, or walking, or standing. So we have his blessing for this. And just making sure we're comfortable. And once again, if possible, we can gently elongate the spine. And then Make sure our hands are comfortably positioned to the sides of our body, or if you feel safer that way, you can put them on your stomach, whatever feels best right now. Their legs are just very slightly apart. If your hands are to the sides, you can turn the palms upwards. That sometimes helps with avoiding sleepiness. And then the next step is to simply notice that contact between our body and the ground. Feel the earth holding us like a gentle, compassionate mother. Noticing the firmness and the stability, and introducing the relaxation response by allowing the whole backside of our body to start releasing the muscle tension. Most people would prefer to keep their eyes closed right now unless you're extremely sleepy and you do want some light. And the next invitation is to perform a body scan. In this case, guided, in that we will go through the same body parts together, noticing the sensations, releasing tension, observing the dance of tactile energy there. Starting with our facial muscles. Softening them to the degree that's possible. Enjoying the contact with this part of our body, the very act of bringing awareness to the face. And then coming down to the neck. Noticing the sensations in our throat, in the neck in general. And then exploring the shoulders. Exploring the upper arms. And the elbows. And then gently coming down to our hands and fingers. And relaxing them deeply to establish a profound sense of stillness there. From there, coming back to the shoulders, and then exploring the sensations in our chest. Then the abdominal area. Softening the abdominal muscles, noticing the sensations in the lower back. coming down to the pelvic floor. And then going down through the area of our thighs, knees, ankles, and then our feet and toes. And then allowing our breath to flow naturally in an uncontrived manner where we're not holding anything, we're not forcing anything. Rather allowing our body to be breathed by the element of air. Allowing this natural flow of breathing to heal, rebalance, reorganize our energies in the most wholesome and supportive way. And while that's happening, while our body is being quite literally healed by the process of natural breathing, bringing our mind to our intention or aspiration for doing this specific yoga nidra practice, but also for doing all of our inner practices in general. This is known as establishing our sankalpa or our intention, but here, instead of thinking of random things that we might want to one day accomplish, we can bring them all together by thinking of the ultimate aspiration for full awakening, fully uncovering our innermost potential, and of the steps leading up to that. And those steps really boil down to activating greater and greater and greater levels of wisdom and love, mental clarity, and heartfelt kindness. So orienting our intention in that direction and planting that seed very firmly in our mind right now. Breathing life into this aspiration with each new natural exhalation. Then, to perform the white Tara practice of this Nidra in accordance with the lineage instructions for this, we imagine that our head is resting on white Tara's lap. She's quite literally sitting there in the full lotus position at the head of our yoga mat, radiant and shining in her snow white form. But our head is resting on her lap because she is guiding and protecting us right now. Like a loving and generous mother, she manifests right there to hold our head, but also to grant us all the blessings that we might need. So her gentle white glow spreading out from every part of her body, from her heart, from her face, dispels all the fears, dispels all the mental gloominess, all the mental heaviness, dispels all types of imbalances and disease in our body, and strengthens all the good things within us, including simply our experience of joyful living, our basic sense of okayness in every moment of our life. So it's as if our body is resting while being protected by the greatest possible force of goodness that is inseparable from our own basic potential. And so for a little while, we just bask in that glow and in that same sense of safety, that sense of okayness, that sense of never being alone because Vaitara is always with us. But then to perform the additional balancing element of it, if we want, we can think that Vaitara is fully intent to help us with establishing a greater degree of physical and mental balance within our system. And to perform that balancing act, taught originally by great Indian yogini, Vaitara sends out from her heart multiple rays of light that reach out to all the great expressions of the earth element in the universe. Majestic mountains, deserts, everything that expresses that quality of heaviness, solidity, firmness, and not just on this planet, but across the universe. These rays of light gather all of that energy in the form of yellow, radiant light that flows back into Vaitara's heart. And then we imagine that that yellow light transforms into yellow nectar that flows out of Tara's heart into our crown, into our entire body, reaching every corner of our body and rebalancing the earth element within us. So if anything needed to be strengthened in the earth element of our body, it is being strengthened right now. Then she does the same with the water element. It's once again sending out these rays of light that gather the vital essence of the water element from the oceans and rivers and springs. And it's all gathered into her heart in the form of white energy, which then flows into our body as white nectar, revitalizing, balancing, healing, strengthening the water element if it needs to be strengthened, or balancing it if it needs to be balanced. Then the same is done for the fire element. Volcanoes, stars, even candle fires all grant that vital energy that is collected in her heart in the form of red energy. And then this vital essence transforms into red nectar that flows into our body, strengthening everything that is connected with the heat and healthy warmth within our body. Strengthening, balancing, revitalizing. Re-energizing when that's necessary. Softening when some softening is needed. And then, the same for the element of air or wind or movement. All the great masses of moving air grant their vital essence, and it streams into Tara's heart as green energy that then flows into our body as a boundless stream, endless stream of nectar. This restores the balance of everything that is moving within our body, not simply limited to air itself. And so everything that needs to be strengthened is strengthened, everything needs to be balanced is balanced. And we enjoy this vitality of the element of air. And then for the final part, she also invokes the element of space, gathering it from everywhere where there is spaciousness. And so it streams into her heart as blue energy and then flows into our very being. And in addition to balancing the energy of space within our body, it also brings spaciousness to our mind. The ability to do everything without feeling limited. Enough space to include everything that we want to include into our life. All of that flows into us as this blue, blissful nectar. And then we feel and imagine that all the 5 quintessential energies of our body and mind have therefore been rebalanced, restored, revitalized, re-energized, as they would normally be when we're sleeping. We then once again simply enjoy this feeling of White Tara being there and holding our crown. Enjoy imagining the gentle glow that streams out, imagining that all sounds are indeed the sound of White Tara's mantra, and that all of our thoughts, even sleepy thoughts or irritated thoughts or lazy thoughts, are the play of White Tara's primordial awareness. So cutting through our sense of solidity by transforming it all mentally into something different. And then imagining that White Tara melts into light and absorbs into us to grant us with that sense of spacious unity. And with that, noticing the sensations in the body once again, in our feet, in our hands, in our face. And gently starting to move our fingers and our toes. Slowly opening our eyes if they were closed. And without rushing into anything, when we're ready, turning our right side and resting for some time in that position. And then when we're ready and when our mind feels once again clear and bright, very gently, with the support of our left hand, pushing ourselves up into the upright position and concluding the practice with just a few moments of mindful sitting. And then we can think of all the seeds that we have collectively sown today through, for many of us, first the asana and practice, and then through this foundational exploration of Tantra, Vaitara, and so forth. We dedicate all the positive energy from that to our mind fully waking up, and to all beings being free from suffering and fully endowed with happiness. May it all come true and transform the interdependence of things into something infinitely auspicious. And with that positive thought, we conclude. Thank you very much. So that's it for today. Yes. So, on February 11, 12, 10, 11, first weekend. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's third and fourth, I think. So basically, on the first weekend in February, we will do a 2-day workshop on the four measurables, meaning the practices of loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These are taught in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but especially elaborately taught in the Buddhist tradition. And these are wonderful meditation techniques. If you want to do Vaitara practice or really any other tantric practice, you would need those as building blocks, but they are also very well researched in terms of their health benefits, their effect on our genetic system, our nervous system, and so forth. So from the scientific side, there's also a lot of support for doing those practices. So we're going to do a 2-day workshop. Everyone is very welcome to join. We're just going to meditate on all four, learn their definitions, and establish some foundation that they can later be further expanded. Anyone can join regardless of Buddhist or not, doesn't matter. It's a practice that's completely universal because it's taught in multiple traditions, basically. So that's going to be, one of my last gigs in London. So yeah, I think actually, yeah, if not the last one that I'm doing in London in general. And then I think later on we have a plan to do first monthly, and then we'll see Yoga Nidra sessions. So the benefit of that is that you would only hear yourself and me. So if right now you were getting exasperated by all the snoring people, that would not happen. The only person snoring there would be you. So and Zoom, we will mute everyone on Zoom, and I will not be snoring while I'm leading it. Hopefully, let's see. So that would be a way to train in that, and of course, there's a learning curve to Yoga Nidra in a way because you're gradually teaching your body to not fall fully asleep, and that's kind of what then allows you to always when you meditate in that position to stay lucid and clear and receive all the benefits in that. And then eventually, on the basis of that, to also expand, bring lucidity to your dreams. So that's a good preparation for lucid dreaming, and then to even sleepless state, because you can also be dreamless state. You can also be lucid in the deep dreamless sleep when there's no appearances, but you still are widely aware. So Yoga Nidra is kind of a preparation for all of that. So we'll start doing that monthly. And there will always be an element of four measurables in each one of those. So it will be Yoga Nidra combined with loving kindness and with compassion and with empathetic joy and so forth. So yeah, Oh no, I'm super, super happy. You know, it's nice to have, I'm not going to be fully jobless. So, you know, if, mm, mm. Well, I think for different people, these different, slightly different tricks work because for some, for example, I have a relatively strong essential tremor. So for me, if I hold my hand like that, I would simply be noticing the tremor in my hand. That's not convenient. So I think for me, it's easier to put my hands to the sides. But what I sometimes do is that I put my hands when I'm doing shorter supine meditations under my buttocks. So that, like, if you're doing a 40-minute meditation, they will fall asleep. That's not nice. But if it's like a 10, 15-minute session, that will prevent you from falling asleep. So there's just a kind of an exploration there that you can do different things. Or just the pressure of your body weight keeps your kind of noticing, okay, the sensation is so strong that can prevent you from falling asleep. But I think also keeping your eyes open, being in a space that is relatively well lit, you know, and things like that, or having triple espresso before you do this practice. But beyond that, honestly, the main thing that the lamas always say, all of my teachers always say, is that make sure you just get enough sleep. You know, the reason you're falling asleep is, yes, one is that you don't have the habit of meditating in the supine position, so that will change as you keep practicing, blah, blah, blah. But another thing is that everyone is so underslept that the moment there is a chance to get, like, to take a nap, everyone's immediately starts snoring just because the body is so tired. So, you know, we do what we can, obviously, with like jobs and stuff. But if it's possible to just get a tiny bit more sleep, it will improve your chances of not falling asleep in yoga nidra. But to be fair, even if you do fall asleep, okay, at least you slept, you know. So then for the upright meditation, yes, it's good to chase away sleepiness because otherwise the dullness kicks in and it becomes a habitual, and then you just end up being more dull and your intellect becomes less sharp over time. So that's not good. But kind of how often do we do yoga nidra? Most people do it like once a year, if not, you know, once a lifetime, or once a month, or once a week. So there's a reason to be gentle with ourselves there. But over time, yes, we'll strengthen that habit, and then we can, if especially if we do long-term retreats, it's a very good habit to have because then you can do a session of supine meditation, meditation in the spine position, and then a session of meditation where you're sitting upright, and you will alternate those things, and your body will not get too desperate about constantly having to sit for like 12 hours at a time. So a good thing to practice with. And when you're home on Zoom listening to it, you will not disturb anyone. No one will disturb you. So feel free to join. But thank you for your patience. Yeah, we've stayed over time. And as I've mentioned, there is a White Tara explanation thingy on my YouTube channel, Lobsang Tenpa something something. Just if you search on for Lobsang Tenpa on YouTube, they will find it. And I have some White Tara meditations on Insight Timer. So if you use that, you can just continue practicing through those sorts of things. Yeah. So good luck. Enjoy your new year. And maybe we'll see each other in February. Thank you.